The night sky over Medellín glowed with helicopter lights. Sirens wailed far below. On a red-tile rooftop, a heavy man in a wrinkled shirt crouched and wiped sweat from his brow. Pablo Escobar, once the most powerful drug trafficker in the world, was out of breath and out of time. Police voices echoed from stairwells. Radios crackled. A spotlight swept across the roof like a bright white blade. For years, Pablo had moved planes, cash, and men like pieces on a board. He had sent cocaine north and money south, until the numbers no longer felt real. He had friends in suits and enemies with guns. He gave gifts to the poor and fear to anyone who said no. But tonight, the game felt small. The roof was narrow. The tiles were loose. Every shout from below sounded closer than the one before. He pressed his back to a chimney and listened. He could almost hear the city breathing. Motorbikes on distant streets, dogs barking, a radio playing a love song in some apartment window. But over it all, the thump of helicopter rotors beat like a second heart. Pablo pictured his mother's small house where he grew up. He pictured his wife and children moving from safe house to safe house, always waiting for a phone that might never ring again. He pictured a soccer field he had paid for on a hillside. Children running after a ball as if money fell out of the sky. How did it come to this? Not long ago, he had a private zoo with hippos, lakes where the water looked like glass, and rooms stacked with dollars that smelled like paper and dust. Back then, he could call a mayor a judge or a police captain and hear soft answers. Back then, he believed he had built a country inside a country, with his own rules and his own flag. Now his phone calls were a trail, and his rules meant nothing. A burst of gunfire rang out from the stairwell door. Pablo flinched. Bullets skip-tapped the tiles. He slid along the edge of the roof, feet feeling for grip, heart heavy in his chest. His only bodyguard on this house, young, loyal, and scared, whispered that the back wall might be jumpable to the next rooftop. It looked far. It looked impossible. But the front was certain death. Pablo nodded. Together they crept toward the shadow corner. Keeping low, each step a small slide. He felt the old calm return, the strange stillness he had known during deals, raids, and midnight drives on jungle roads. The world narrowed to angles and seconds. He had survived ambushes, traps, and betrayals. Maybe he would survive this. He looked down. The gap between buildings was a black mouth. He measured the distance with his eyes and with the memory of the boy he once was, running the broken streets of his neighborhood, fast and fearless. Behind him, the stairwell door banged open. Boots pounded the roof. A voice shouted his name. "Now!" the bodyguard hissed. Pablo took 2 quick steps, planted his foot, and pushed off into the dark. He hung in the air a little longer than he thought he would. For a strange, floating second, he felt weightless, like a coin tossed and waiting to land. The sound of the helicopter faded, and the city fell quiet. Then gravity reached up and pulled him down hard toward the edge of the next roof. Would he clear the gap or fall into the alley below, where the police lights painted the walls red and blue? Years before that jump, the boy who would become Pablo Escobar walked dusty streets with holes in his shoes and big plans in his head. He was quick with numbers and quicker with courage. He learned that doors opened if you knocked hard enough, or kicked. He sold small things, fixed little deals, and watched who carried fear in their eyes. He looked at rich houses on hills and promised himself he would live up there someday. As a teen, he bragged that he would be a millionaire by 30. He did not say how. He tried many hustles. Some were petty, some were bold. Each one taught him a rule. Money listens to people who do not blink. In the late 1970s, a new kind of money whispered his name. Cocaine. In the United States, the drug was spreading through clubs and offices, through stadium seats and quiet cul-de-sacs. Demand exploded and supply needed a road. Pablo did not build a road. He built a highway. At first the loads were small and daring. Suitcases, secret panels, plane tires stuffed with powder. Then the planes grew bigger, then fleets, then airstrips hidden under green jungle roofs. He formed the Medellín Cartel, a web of pilots, accountants, drivers, gunmen, and smooth talkers. He did not lead from far away. He stood on airstrips at dawn, counted bricks at warehouses, and promised bonuses with a grin that never reached his eyes. Money showed up like weather. It filled rooms. It bent shelves. It fattened notebooks with names and bribes. Dollars were wrapped in plastic, buried in fields, walled up inside farms, and left to the rats when no one could remember where they hid them. Some nights he would sit with his brother and flip pages in ledgers until the numbers made them laugh. He measured success not by what he could buy, but by who had to ask him for permission. Yet Pablo also learned to give. He paid for houses on steep hillsides where the poor balanced their lives like birds. He built soccer fields, clinics, and small schools. He walked through crowds handing out bills, his hair neat, his shirt clean, his smile soft. El Patron, people said with warmth. He liked the word. He wore it like a jacket. But gifts were a shield, not armor. The other side of his face was cold. Silver or lead, his men told officials, take the money or take the bullet. Judges who stood straight were knocked down. Police who said no vanished. A reporter who wrote too close to the truth never made it home. And every time a lawman fell, 10 more learned to look away. Pablo reached for something bigger, politics. He ran for office and won a seat. He spoke in Congress with a businessman's tone. He posed for pictures beside respectable men who wore expressions they could not hold. But the mask cracked quickly. A brave journalist told the country what many already knew. The smiling man with charity in his hands also ran the world's largest cocaine empire. The shame burned powerful people. The United States pushed hard from the north. Talk of extradition, a one-way flight to an American court, filled the air like smoke. Pablo felt cornered and bared his teeth. Car bombs ripped through Bogota. Assassins traced routes through city traffic, like dark commas. Fear spread faster than news. Then came a plan that sounded like a joke but wasn't. Surrender, but only on his terms. In 1991, he walked into custody and moved into a prison he designed himself high in the hills called La Catedral. It had a view like a postcard, a soccer field, good food, and friendly guards. From inside, he still made calls, still counted cash, still settled scores. For a while, the world accepted the lie, until 2 men were killed inside those walls at his command. The country's patience snapped. Soldiers drove up the mountain to move him to a real cell with real bars. But when they pushed open the gate, they found empty rooms and a door swinging in the wind. Pablo was gone, swallowed by fog and forest. From that moment, every phone call he made would be a tiny thread, and the people hunting him would start to pull. Back on the rooftops, Pablo did not fall. His belly scraped the far edge and he slammed his elbows down, teeth rattling, fingers clawing for grip. The tiles shifted but held. He rolled onto the next roof and gasped, alive for at least 1 more second. Behind him, the bodyguard jumped, caught, and pulled himself over with a rough grunt. From the first rooftop, officers shouted positions. New boots pounded new stairs. They ran low, crossed to a hatch, clambered down into a dim hallway that smelled like frying oil and laundry soap. An old TV buzzed somewhere with a game show laugh track. The bodyguard checked the stairwell and shook his head, blocked. They pushed through a metal door onto a second rooftop. From above, a helicopter light washed them in white. Pablo's world had shrunk from a country to a roof. He knew why. The search block, the special police unit created to find him, did not sleep. The Cali cartel, his oldest rivals, quietly fed information wherever hurt. U.S. agents passed along technology and patience. And the poorest neighborhoods that once cheered him now wanted quiet more than gifts. He was a legend, yes, but legends are loud, and people were tired. He had tried to move his family out of Colombia, and failed. He had tried to shake the hunters by changing houses, cars, and drivers like shirts. But one weakness tied him to the map, calls to his son. A father's voice could betray a king as quickly as a spy. Each conversation traced a circle the police could tighten if they waited long enough. Now the circle was a noose. He glanced at the bodyguard and saw fear under the young man's bravado. Pablo thought of all the boys he had hired. The ones who learned to count cash before they learned to shave. The ones who believed loyalty would beat math. He wanted to tell the boy to run, to disappear into the city and start over, to pick a name no one recognized. But the boy would not leave. That was the problem with loyalty. It stayed when it should go. A radio burst to life on a nearby balcony. He's on the second roof. A voice said in crisp Spanish, "Two men." Pablo moved to the far edge. Another gap, a little narrower. He could make it. He could always make it. Until the time he didn't. He tucked the pistol into his waistband, wiped his palms on his pants, and took a step back to get a running start. Then the phone in his pocket vibrated. It was a number only his family used. For a second, the roar of the helicopter and the thumping boots fell away. He pictured his son, scared but trying not to sound it. He pictured his wife, tired eyes, soft voice, always telling him to keep his head down and call less. He had promised a phone after dark. He had promised many things. He answered. "I'm fine," he said. "Don't worry." He kept his voice calm, like a stone skipping over water. The call lasted a handful of heartbeats. He said he loved them. He said he would come home. He hung up and looked at the sky. Across the city, a team in a small room stared at a blinking signal on a gray box and marked a spot on a paper map. They radioed coordinates. Trucks turned. Boots changed direction. A pilot swung the helicopter's nose and poured light onto the roofs like noon. The bodyguard tugged his sleeve. "Patron," he whispered. "Now." They ran and jumped together. Again the edge rushed up. Again they hit hard and rolled. Bullets snapped like dry twigs. The bodyguard jerked and stumbled, then kept moving, blood blooming dark on his shirt. A shout rose from the stairwell. They had just left. Another roof. Another blind corner. Another dead end. Pablo ducked behind a vent and caught his breath. He thought of everything he had built and everything he had broken. He thought of the field where children still kicked the ball at sunset, the dust turning gold. He thought of the man he had ordered into darkness and the families who waited for footsteps that never returned. He stood, tugged the pistol free, and made his last choice. He would not go back to a cell, not to a court, not to a lifetime of glass windows and metal doors. He would move forward, one more roof, one more gamble, one more second snatched from the hands closing in. He sprinted along the ridge line, shoulders low, gun tight to his side. A soldier rose from a stairwell and shouted. Another light blazed to life. The crack of a rifle rolled across the tiles. A single bullet found the soft place behind Pablo's ear. He dropped, heavy and sudden, as if someone cut the string that held him up. The pistol slid away and tapped once against the roof. The world tilted and then flattened. The helicopter light burned the color out of the scene. Boots surrounded him. Radios went quiet. Somewhere, a dog barked. News carried across Medellín faster than wind. Some people cheered. Some people cried. Most people went back inside and shut their doors. The city exhaled. Later, questions would remain. Who gave the final tip? Which rival signed the last quiet deal? Was the fatal shot from a soldier? Or, as some would claim, from Pablo himself, a choice made in a heartbeat to control the last page? History would argue. Families would remember. Children would grow up and tell stories about a man who built mountains out of money and then fell from a roof. But on that bright white rooftop, the story had already chosen its ending. The rise was over. The fall was complete. And the city below, for the first time in years, began to hear its own heartbeat again.